I have done a lot of stupid things in my life, but the absolute worst thing I ever did, the thing that still wakes me up in a cold sweat, was trying to be funny. I almost killed my best mate for a laugh. The cab of a lorry is no place for a comedian. When you are holding the steering wheel of a 40-ton Arctic, you are driving a lethal weapon. But when you are young, bored, and driving through the middle of the night, your brain does not always think about physics. Let me tell you about a run I did about 10 years ago with a bloke named Steve-O. Steve-O was my best mate. We practically grew up in the haulage yard together. We were doing a 2-lorry convoy, running empty trailers up the A1 towards Newcastle. It was 2 in the morning, pitch black, and it was absolutely tipping it down with rain. We were on the hands-free, chatting away, trying to keep each other awake. Boredom is a dangerous thing on the motorway, mate. It makes your mind wander. Steve-O told me he had just poured himself a boiling hot cup of coffee from his thermos, and right then, a completely idiotic idea popped into my head. I was driving in front. Steve-O was directly behind me, following my tail lights. I thought it would be absolutely hilarious to give him a little jump scare. Just a quick tap of the foot brake. Not enough to actually slow down, just enough to flash the bright red brake lights in his face and make him spill his coffee. I waited until he was mid-sentence on the phone. I hovered my heavy work boot over the brake pedal. I told myself, just a tiny tap, just a quick flash. I pressed the pedal, but I forgot about the automatic retarder. In modern lorries, when you touch the brake pedal, the engine retarder kicks in to help slow the massive weight of the vehicle. Because I was pulling an empty trailer, the lorry did not just flash its lights. The brakes grabbed the wet tarmac. Hard. My lorry violently jerked and dropped 10 miles an hour in the blink of an eye. I heard Steve-O scream down the hands-free. He had virtually zero reaction time. He was right on my bumper. In a blind panic, he slammed both feet onto his brake pedal and yanked the steering wheel to the right to avoid going into the back of my trailer. I looked in my wing mirror, and my blood ran completely cold. Steve-O's cab violently swerved into the outside lane, but his trailer was empty. There was no weight over the rear axles to keep the tires pushed down onto the road. The trailer locked up and started to aquaplane on the standing water. It kicked out to the left, then it whipped back to the right. Snaking. The absolute worst thing you can see in your mirrors. A 40-foot metal box swinging like a pendulum across 2 lanes of the motorway. I watched in pure horror as his trailer whipped towards the central reservation. Sparks flew into the dark sky as the rear bumper scraped the metal crash barrier. He was a split second away from a full high-speed jackknife. If he went over, the cab would crush him. I was sitting in my warm, safe driver's seat, watching my best mate about to die. And it was entirely my fault, because I wanted a cheap laugh. Somehow, by an absolute miracle, Steve-O let off the brakes and steered into the sway. He fought that steering wheel with everything he had. The trailer whipped one last time, violently shook the cab, and then finally snapped back into a straight line. Silence. There was absolute dead silence on the hands-free. Neither of us said a single word. We both slowed down to a crawl and pulled onto the hard shoulder. I put my handbrake on, and my hands were shaking so violently I could barely open the door. I climbed out into the pouring rain and ran back to his lorry. I climbed up his steps and opened his cab door. Steve-O was sitting there, gripping the steering wheel. He was as white as a ghost. His boiling hot coffee was splashed all over the dashboard, dripping down the windscreen. He didn't punch me. He didn't even shout. He just looked at me with this hollow, terrified expression. He said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." I have never felt so utterly ashamed in my entire life. I felt sick to my stomach. We didn't speak for the rest of the journey. In fact, things were never quite the same between us after that night. Here is the lesson, and I want every single driver to listen to me very carefully. I do not care how bored you are. I do not care how funny you think it is. A motor vehicle is not a toy. A 40-ton lorry is not a joke. Never fake a brake check. Never swerve to scare your mates. Never mess about with physics. Because physics does not have a sense of humor. It only takes one patch of wet road, one split second of panic, and your stupid joke becomes a fatal accident. Keep your head screwed on out there. Drive like a professional. Every single mile. If this story gave you a wake-up call, drop a like on the video. It helps more people hear the message. Subscribe for more honest, real stories from the UK tarmac. And let me know in the comments below. What is the stupidest thing you have ever seen someone do on the motorway for a laugh? Respect the road, mates. Keep the shiny side up.